Hello and welcome to Miniature Adventures. I'm Big Lee, and this week I want to talk about our friendly local game shops yet again. So I've touched on this subject plenty of times before, but the reason I wanted to talk about it this week was because I visited a store in Saffron Walden actually. A day trip out, a little bit of shopping, I get a game shop in, mooch around some of the second-hand bookstores, everyone's happy, lunch out, sorted. But I was rather alarmed that not for the first time I went to this little game shop and I was the only patron in there. And it does make me concerned that these high street stores are going to struggle, really struggle in the coming year, as well as having all the usual energy costs, a lot of businesses and rates and everything else. They're also having to contend perhaps with cost of living pushing down the number of patrons coming through their door. So I ain't going to name the particular store, but anyone who knows the area will know the store I'm talking about. I always pop in there, pick up a few paints. There's not a lot of their range that they carry that I follow, because it's mostly Games Workshop products, so sci-fi and fantasy type games. They do have a role-playing game section, so they have some books and some models specific for role-playing games. So I'll always go and have a look at those, because as everyone knows, I play D&D as much as I play tabletop war games, and I'll usually try and buy some paint or other. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Games Workshop paints in general, but I have bought and tried and quite liked their contrast paint, so I'll tend to pick up a pot of that. On this particular occasion, I picked up a pot of their liquid green stuff. To be honest, the only product that Games Workshop make that I think is actually excellent. I use it on a lot of different modelling projects, and my pot was running out, so I popped in there to pick up a pot of liquid green stuff. As I say, I picked up a couple of spray cans of paint, stuff that I needed. I'm not, the brushes that they sell, for instance, aren't a wide enough range for me. Again, Games Workshop brushes, I've had terrible experiences with those in the past, so I'm not interested in that product myself. But I mean, I spent quite a while having a peruse, even though I wasn't going to buy the Games Workshop paints, I was having a look through, looking at the colour range, looking at various products, making sure I was being thorough about looking at all the products they had on the shelf in that particular store. And I spent my time having a look at some of the rather expensive boxes of models and starter sets for various Games Workshop games there, looking at the prices and thinking, crikey, that's a lot. But not the sort of games that I'm going to buy or play, which is all great. Still at the end of the day, I enjoyed having a little look and picking them up and having a mooch. And I spent quite a bit of time having a look at the role-playing stuff. I ended up buying myself a set of figures. From there, the pre-primed stuff for role-playing games, Dungeons and Dragons specific. I was going to treat myself to another D&D rule book, but unfortunately they didn't have the one I wanted, which is one of the downsides, I suppose, of a bricks and mortar store. You can only buy what they have in stock. But I was in the store for probably about half an hour having a good look through, and I probably spent £25–30 on bits and bobs. To be honest, other than the green stuff, the rest I didn't really need, but I picked up anyway, because I wanted to put a little bit of business the store's way. And we're not talking a vast sum of money. They weren't going to pack up and retire based on what I spent that day. But as I say, because they didn't carry the ranges that I'm necessarily interested in as a primarily historical wargamer. But the thing that caught my attention was the fact that I was in that store for at least half an hour and nobody else came in. The store was empty. And this was midday, when you would expect there to be some custom in the store. Literally no one else, just me and a rather bored looking store owner, I presume, the same guy who's always behind the till. And I did, not for the first time, found myself wondering how bricks and mortar stores like that manage to survive. Now, I've said this before, that whenever I go on holiday or have a weekend away or we visit a new town, I always try and hunt down the local game store to have a little look at the very least, and if I can, I'll try and buy a few items out there. Over the years, I've managed to collect all manner of specialist paints and pots of various stuff that I'm probably never going to use, simply because I'm trying to put a little bit of business in the store's way. But it's always an interesting experience going into one of these little game stores that perhaps has multidisciplines, so they're into railway modelling and as well as wargaming models, or maybe other crafts and stuff. And you know, as a rule, I would say my experience is that the more diverse the range of stuff in the store, the busier they tend to be. That's been my experience. And so, you know, there's going to be some specialist stores that perhaps only do wargaming stuff or tabletop stuff that are possibly going to struggle. And as much as I would prefer all of the shelf space to be for the hobby that I love, I do recognise that diversity is possibly is the way to go for these sort of stores, to appeal to as wide a range of customers as possible, so that when they come in, you maximise the chance that anyone that walks through the door will find something of interest to them and spend some money. But as I say, you know, half an hour in this store, I was the only client, and you know, that's a little bit alarming, because normally when I go in there, there's one or two other people in there, usually some frustrated parent and their rug rat demanding to buy something. But you know, I'm normally not the only person that's spending money in the store. But this was one of the first times I've been there where literally I was the only one in there. Now, it may just been luck of the draw that this time I went, there wasn't many people in there. But I suspect, rather worryingly, this is going to be a reflection of the current cost of living crisis that everyone's going through. You know, people having to tighten their belts, having less money to spend on things like hobbies and pastimes, and therefore less money to spend in what are effectively fairly specialist stores. So this brings me round to, as usual, the question I wanted to ask you. What is your experience of your local game store? Does your experience of this store reflect what I just experienced in the store that I visited? Are you seeing a downturn in the number of people visiting and potentially spending money? Even better, if you're directly involved with the store, do you have any empirical evidence to sort of tell us how stores are doing? I mean, I was thinking about the viability of traders attending shows. As this video goes out, I will be at the Cavalier show in Tunbridge in Kent. My group's first game show of the year, usually our first game show of the year. Not a large event, but it has a good selection of traders, and I always end up restocking from stuff, particularly at this time of year when I'm well into the painting challenge and I've used a load of paints and I desperately need to get some stuff. So the Cavalier show is a good place for me to stock up, because for British shows they tend to have a large trade element, and certainly for such a medium-sized show, Cavalier does have a good selection of traders. And I was thinking the other day, how do traders justify the expense of attending these sort of shows? And I suspect, and again, any experience of this would be really useful. I suspect that for many of them, a bricks and mortar store just isn't viable on its own. So they have to have some sort of element of roadshow, for want of a better word, where they take their products to the customers to sell. I'd just be interested. If you've been involved in a store, or you're directly involved in a store, what is your experience? Do you think that this year is going to be a tough one for high street stores? Do you think they're going to have to rely more on getting out and taking their products out to shows? Or do you think that the whole idea of traders at shows and high street stores is going to come to an end because it's easier and cheaper and quicker usually online? If you can get what you want at the click of a few buttons, why would you attend your friendly local game store? That's a rhetorical question. I believe that there's some value in that crossover, that synergy of different a wider range of products. Railway modelling products might be useful to the wargamer, and the wargaming products might be useful to the role player, and so on. So I do find there's some value in these sort of stores that have a wider range of products. And some of the best game stores I've visited are not exclusively wargaming stores. They have a wide range of stuff, but obviously not the same business model as the Evil Empire. But nonetheless, some stores seem to do better than others because they've got this multi-discipline. So I've rambled a little bit there, but basically I wanted to know, what do you think? What's your experience? So has your local store survived COVID for a start? And do you think they're going to get through the next year? Or do you think it's going to be tough for them? I know I've touched on this subject many times before, but it's just something that I've been thinking about this week because, like I say, I've been out and about, I've visited the store, I'm going to be at a show today, and just the subject of how these small stores and companies that we know and love, how are they going to survive? I mean, the hobby industry in general is renowned for the number of businesses that have come and gone and don't survive. Are we going to see another spate of that over the coming 12 months, or do you think that COVID has given them the resilience? If they've survived that, they can survive anything. As always, I'd love to hear your views and your experiences of this subject. So that's it for this week. Bit of a ramble, but if you've enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe and share, and of course if you want to keep up to date with my weekly videos, hit the bell notification icon. So until next week, look after yourself, keep gaming, and of course keep rolling high.